Welcome to Shorts Beyond Measure, where fashion, interiors, and psychology get the stylish, savvy, and slightly therapeutic touch.
We're Tara West, Caroline and Allison Goldberg, a fashion stylist and two interior designers who are also trained as psychotherapists.
So let's get into what's trending, what's tired, and what's actually worth your time. Because good style and good decisions should never be short-lived.
Hello, today we are talking about stories. And man, do I have a story. I gotta get going on my book.
Yeah, I'm going to read that.
I know, right?
It's juicy.
I want to know it
Just
all.
kidding.
Same.
So Caroline, take us through a little bit of what you're thinking in terms of stories.
Yeah, so the idea came to me because at a certain point in time in my private practice, I was really into using narrative therapy. And in narrative therapy, you as the therapist are asking your client to really go deep in a chronological, whatever their chronology is, way, recounting their life. You're witnessing them experience it. You're witnessing how they put words to it, and they end up reauthoring this life that they've had, right? And it's really healing. What it made me think about, though, is that I have so many friends and so many people in my life that I don't even know their stories.
Yeah. It's really interesting, especially with narrative therapy, because we know like these chunks, these like big stepping stones. If you think of narrative therapy as like from one big event to the next, and what you're trying to do is kind of fill in those little gaps because there's much more to it than just the trauma. But I do want to know about your trauma because I feel like I'm the only person you're like, oh, most of my listeners know. I don't know anything about that.
So, well, let me just say one of the reasons why I started telling my story. First of all, I always kind of knew that I would tell my story because it is a story and I think a lot of people can relate to it. But also, I think when we see people on Instagram and social media, we assume, as I assume, we all assume. And I just wanted people to know that life isn't that easy. And I've worked really hard for where I've come to, where I've gotten to. My story is a very long story, but to keep it short is, I grew up with an alcoholic, drug addicted mother who we had a lot of means. So it was not normal. Like people didn't think like, oh, things are going on in their home because we presented very well until we didn't. And so, it was years and years of crazy. I mean, I'm talking crazy. There are stories that I cannot even express, but growing up, I never knew if my mom was going to be sober, who would be at my house. One time we had the Hare Krishnas there.
Wow.
I woke up one morning and they were all in my living room. I never ever thought about what did my mom do last night? But that night I was like, how did she get the Hare Krishnas at my house? But, and that's just like one of many. But really the trauma is I was my mother's daughter. And so it was my responsibility to be taking care of her, but also the responsibility was put on me by everybody else. And it was my fault. It was my fault that my mom drank so much. She put me in therapy because she said, if they fix you, all of our problems will go away.
Oh my gosh.
And that was probably when I was 3. Not only was my mom, obviously an alcoholic and a drug addict, but she also had mental illness, which I think go hand in hand, as you guys probably know.
Right. Self-medicating.
But it took an incredible toll. And so my brothers and I have 2 brothers, twins, they're older than me. We lived with my mom in California. My dad left her. And then we moved to Colorado. And then my mom's just got really out of hand for many, many years. I had a 3rd grade teacher who took me in and she would let me stay at her house. And then my mom tried to get her arrested because she said that, why is this woman taking care of my daughter?
Someone needed to.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so then it's really long, but we ended up moving to California with my dad, and my step monster, which I call her because she is a monster, wouldn't let me stay at their house. She'd let my brothers, but not me. So I had to go live with my grandmother, who was my best friend. And we lived in Beverly Hills, which suited me very well.
Sounds amazing. Just kidding.
But then, my mom got into a serious car accident. She took somebody's life drunk driving. And then she also put the other person in a wheelchair for life.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And when you're living in Beverly Hills, it doesn't matter. I guess it really doesn't matter where you're living,
Yeah.
but when you're living in Beverly Hills, this is not accepted at
Mhm.
all. My mother wasn't a rock star. And so I would sit in class and people would spit spitballs in my hair. And so I left.
Sounds like everyone was just taking it
It
out on
was
you.
a horrible thing. And then I went to, then my mom was in prison for, maybe
Vehicular homicide, right?
vehicular homicide.
Wow.
And my father, who once he dropped me off at my grandmother's, never spoke to me again. He got her out on good behavior because he's a lawyer. He's a criminal defense attorney. And so he got her out. And then my grandmother was too old to have me live there. So I went to live with my mom again. And it was just chaos. She was, oh, by the way, in between all this, she had been married several times. And so then I don't know, I would say I was 16 and I had a boyfriend and I wanted to go to a party. And by the way, I was a really good kid. I dabbled in drinking and stuff, but I didn't do anything crazy. And what,
Me either.
Yeah,
and
right.
what 16-year-old doesn't want to go, or what 16-year-old doesn't lie? Like, I wanted to spend the night with my boyfriend and it was a party. And I came in the next morning and my stepfather threw me to the ground and beat my head against the floor
Oh my God,
about
Tara.
7 times.
Wow.
And I ran. I ran for my life. I didn't have anything. I had no shoes, no money,
Mm.
nothing. And I just said to myself, Tara, you got to make a decision. Either you live like this and fail miserably in life, or you get out and make something of yourself.
Oh my God, I have chills right now.
I was 16 and my uncle, who is a big part of my life, I called him because my dad wouldn't take me in and he said, come live with us. Like, you have to get out.
Yeah.
And it was crazy.
Wow. You're so resourceful and so courageous. Like, just to have that moment of clarity of like, I need to do this. I deserve more.
Well, I just knew that I wanted a better life. I knew my mom was crazy. Like, I used to go to other people's homes. I knew life didn't have to be like that, but I didn't like who I was. Because when you have parents who literally don't care about you, my parents literally didn't care about me, it's really hard to like yourself. It's
Yeah.
so hard. Like,
And all the blame's going on you.
all the blame. And there was nobody to like. I had certain people like my 3rd grade teacher, my grandmother, now my uncle, who are the people who said to me, you matter enough that I'm going to take care of you. And if it wasn't for them, I would not be who I am right now.
That's like a
It's crazy.
heartbreaking story.
I've been to a lot of therapy. Well, that was it. I hadn't been to a
Yeah.
lot of therapy, but a lot of therapists would say to me, that's like one of the worst cases of neglect. Even though, and I was lucky, I had a home, I had roof over my head, but
It wasn't safe.
nobody cared.
Yeah.
Right. And they do say that socioeconomics can really mask the symptoms. And, you can have a nanny, you can hire somebody, you can have a house cleaner. Your house doesn't look like a bomb hit because
Yeah.
there's so many resources.
And so from then on, when I went to college, because I knew if I went to college, I would have a ticket to life. Like, to me, going to college was like, all right, this is it. You can start to live your life. So I went to Ithaca College, which is really funny because it's so far away. And it's just so different than who I was, but I really thrived. And, then I went back to LA, went to USC, and then I met my husband. But in all of this, I was working on myself because I wanted to be a good version of who I was. And I didn't want to carry any of that stuff with me. And it's been a lot of work, as you can only imagine, how much damage. And I had to learn to like myself.
Absolutely.
It was a lot. So anyways, my mom, everybody would always say to me, what are you going to do when your mom dies? How are you going to feel? Because I hadn't talked to her.
Right.
And she was really sick and I hadn't seen her, but she was still into drugs and alcohol. And 3 years ago, she died. And it was horrific. Not that we thought it was going to be like tied up in a bow, but they found her. Somebody didn't find her for 10 days. She drank herself to death. She had 200 bottles of wine when she died around her. And she was living in filth. Now, my mom grew up in Beverly Hills, but she went to USC. This is like
Yeah, you
not
don't
normal.
expect it from her.
And they had to go in hazmat suits to get her out. It was horrific.
God.
And I was sadder than I thought I would be. But I was, I was so sad because it's a sad story. That's a really sad story. But that's my mom.
I know.
Like, that's my mom did that. And that's how she died. And so I had to work through that.
Of course. You should
So
be a
there you
lot
go.
funnier than you are because they say trauma makes you funny. You should be a comedian.
But this is a heavy topic, and
Yeah.
I haven't gotten into that much. I've been on podcasts and talked about it, and I know you guys didn't know all that, but it's a lot. And I think 3 years ago, when something bad happens and then everything bad happens,
Yeah.
it was like that. It was like situation with a friend and then something else and then my mom. And I was like, that's the first time I was like so upset that I felt it in my lower back. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't stand up straight. I like said to one of my friends, I'm like, I just don't, how am I going to get through this? And she said, you've been through so much worse, Tara. Like you literally saved your own life.
Yeah, this is almost freeing once you
Yeah.
get over the grief.
And I think, I think the thing that I wasn't sad she died. We were all relieved. We waited for that phone call our entire lives, like
Yeah.
forever. And so when my brother called me, he's like, I got the phone call. I already knew, like, all right, we got the call. So, but I think really it was, we were relieved, but I think it's just such a sad story of a life that was wasted.
It's so sad. But I love that you have the courage to tell the story and express it because we hold it in our bodies if we
Yeah.
don't get it out, right? Like even the word express means like get out.
Right.
And so it's so valuable that you're sharing the story. I mean, I'm so touched that you're able to tell us about it, but also listeners get to benefit from it too.
Yeah. And so if you want to know, where's my dad?
Yeah, I'm like, when can I
Yeah.
ask the inevitable question?
He is not a nice man. And so he did call me when my mother passed, and he told me, he said, I can't believe you're crying. I said, that's my mom. She
Right.
died a very tragic death. And so he said, well, I guess maybe we should have a relationship. And I said, I don't think so. You've made your choice. You made your choice a long time ago. And I'm telling you, he like cut me off cold, like never was there for me. And so then he told me to go F myself and hung up on me.
Sounds like a great guy.
Wow.
So I'm very lucky to be married to my husband because I could have, and I have chosen very wrong people, as you
Right.
can imagine, but he's a really good guy.
That's awesome.
I know. I'm proud of myself for that, to be honest.
Yeah, it must be really hard for you to trust people considering.
Hard. And I think,
past.
you're always attracted to what you shouldn't be attracted to.
Mm.
And I did that for a long time too, for sure. So knowing all this about me, what do you think?
No, I love it. You just became so much more real to me, right? Like, I feel like there was this whole huge piece of you that we didn't really know. And I'm grateful that you shared that with us.
You're welcome. Well,
I didn't say thank
Oh,
you.
yeah. So my kids, they'll always, let's just call it, my girls got their period. They're going to hate me for saying that. And they're like, well, Mom, where were you? I said, well, my mom was in prison. She had to call me collect. And they're like, there's always a story. Can't it just be normal? Like, what is good? And then my son, like a lot of times, well, first of all, I think it's really important for them to know about the alcohol problem because it's rampant, not only in my family, but also my husband's. Whether we think that it's nature versus nurture or any of these things, just be aware. That's all. I like my daughter's in college. I know she should just be aware.
Mhm.
It runs in our family, but my son will always ask a question and he's just say, you had a really hard life. And I said, yeah, I did. And, I'm not angry. I'm not sad. I think that it's made me who I am. I'm only motivated to be the best version of myself. And I'm thankful that I haven't repeated patterns.
Yeah, I think it's all that healing too that you've worked through in therapy and on your own that's brought you to where you are in your life. You could have never gotten here if you hadn't done the hard work.
Absolutely. And the other thing I want to say is no matter how crazy, and I can't get into all the stories, but like I tell you, you can only imagine how crazy the stories are. We were always dressed. I mean, we would walk in from a crazy freaking night where the cops, who knows what was going on in my house, but we looked damn good. And I think that, like, honestly, that as crazy as that sounds, when you look good, you feel good.
And you can get through
And you can
anything,
get through anything.
including.
And it's so empowering. And so this really is where it stems from. And my grandmother used to take me to Saks Fifth Avenue, and we do, after like crazy, dealing with my mom and
Honey Krishna's in the house.
I know.
Sorry, Krishna's. And so, but we would see fashion shows, and like the smell of leather made me feel better. And it's like all of these things where it really makes sense for what I do.
The smell of a Birkin would make me feel better too.
Me too. I'd feel a lot better.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're
It's
welcome.
like very real and very vulnerable. And I think everyone appreciates it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's Shortlist. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, share it, leave a review, or let us know what's on your short list.
Shorts beyond measure, because the most important things in life can't be quantified.